Second summer I made 75 grand, and then third summer I went out. It was the first time I made 6 figures in a summer. That was life-changing at the time, but it also was an unlock of like, hey, there's bigger and more opportunities out there than just this traditional W-2 model.
And within the first 5 months of making the switch, you acquired 50 properties, which is not normal.
Your greatest asset in any business is people. The cheapest you will ever get great talent is today. It's the cheapest you'll ever get them.
Lame Kinikini, founder and CEO of Elk Ridge Investments, an alternative investment firm that manages over $75 million across real estate, short-term rentals, creative finance, and asset-backed lending.
I would knock on a door, guy comes out, irate, doesn't even know me, hates me already, wants to freaking kick me in the teeth. 45 minutes later, I'm walking out his front door, cold Coke in hand, I have a signed PSA, and he wants me to marry his daughter. I've never been a depressed person. In fact, I think there was a point in time in my life where I attributed it to mental weakness. And things got very real for me. I would wake up and you regret that you did. My escape was sleeping. Someone once told me early on in my career that the greatest business decision you could ever make is who you choose to marry. Me and my wife now have been married for 10 years. And that has continued to ring true the more and more I do in especially the game of entrepreneurship. There's this image that is portrayed of the wealthy, and it's cutthroat, it's nasty, it's grimy. But one thing that I have learned is that the guys that are at the top, they are operating from this incredibly insane place of...
Welcome to the fifth quarter. Today's guest is somebody who decided the traditional path to wealth was a little bit too slow, and he built his own playbook instead. I'm joined by Lame Kinikini, founder and CEO of Elk Ridge Investments, an alternative investment firm that manages over $75 million across real estate, short-term rentals, creative finance, and asset-backed lending. He has closed more than 200 creative finance deals, built Elk Ridge into an 8-figure company in under 5 years, and now he mentors over 100 students through his Fearless Investors community. But here's what makes Lame's story different. He didn't start with money. He started in door-to-door sales, grinding out $100,000 summers, but losing a lot of his time. Real estate was his exit strategy, and creative finance was the unlock. He went from 50 properties in 5 months to managing a portfolio worth tens of millions, all while teaching and empowering others to do the same. Lame's mission is simple and ambitious: to build generational wealth through alternative assets and help others break out of the work 40 years, hope it's enough model. Today, we're going to unpack how he structures deals that most people don't even know are possible, how he thinks about risk when the banks say no, and what it really takes to build wealth that can outlive and outlast you. This is the journey from traditional limitations to creating leverage, from lone investor to leader of an investment ecosystem. Lame, I'm very grateful you've given us the time. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, brother. I'm excited, and I don't take these opportunities lightly where I get to share what little I know about my journey. So I appreciate you giving me the platform, brother.
Yeah, it means a lot that you're here. Lame, most people are still trying to figure out how to buy their first rental property. You went the opposite way, and you built a $75 million alternative portfolio using creative finance. But you started in door-to-door sales. Take me back to the moment you realized, I don't want to play by the traditional rules anymore.
Yeah. I love that question because I think I think as I start to like unpack my journey, a lot of people will hopefully, while they're listening to this or hear it, that they relate to it, right? Because my journey, I don't feel like is very unique. In fact, I think it touches a lot of like the natural human emotions that a lot of people go through. I think the key difference is the action that I took after feeling those emotions, right? Like taking the step to bet on myself. I think for me, it started as early as, I did start in door-to-door sales. That was like almost officially the very first job I ever had. So I, all throughout high school, I kind of did odd jobs. So I was doing like yard work, kind of the normal summer, high schooler job, going mowing people's lawns and getting quick buck. But I never actually owned an official or did an official job because I was always playing football. I was always in sports. And so when I got home, the first thing that I decided to dive into was sales. First, it was over the phone. And the reason I liked it is because the upside, the opportunity. I had started a few other jobs in call centers that I really hated because you were counting hours. And when I would get my final paycheck, I was like, this is dumb. Like, like how does anybody become independently wealthy? Like when they're trading their time for dollars. Right. And so I like sales, and it intrigued me to it because of really the aspect of controlling what you make. Right at the end of the day, you can kind of write the check. And so I started in phone sales, and I was at this company called Vivint, and over the phone sales, regardless of how good I got, I always heard about these door-to-door salesmen that were paid the highest in the company, right? Because it's the elite of sales, right? And back then I was ignorant, right? To me, door-to-door sales was like old-fashioned. It wasn't like sexy. They were often annoying or socially awkward. And those are all things that I learned couldn't have been further from the truth. But I wanted to know what it was about, right? So I did my first summer, and first summer I made 40 grand. Second summer I made 75 grand. Mind you, this is summer sales, so you're out there for 4 months, right? So as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old making 40 grand in one summer, that's a lot of money for 4 months, right? And then the second time I did it, it was 75 grand. And the third summer I went out, it was the first time I made six figures in a summer. And that was life changing at the time because it was like good money as a young person, but it also was an unlock of like, hey, there's bigger and more opportunities out there than just this traditional W-2 model, right? And I'm thankful I bring but really that the beginning of this story up because it all plays a significant role. And I feel like that was kind of the model of like eventually jumping into real estate. Because at a certain point in time, I maxed out my capacity in that role. It's making multiple six figures every summer. But I was like, I want to do more, right? And that's when I kind of jumped into real estate. And so it's kind of been this progression of like understanding, hey, there has to be more ways of making money and then making the jump, right? From phone sales to door-to-door sales, from door-to-door sales to real estate. But along each step, like there's definitely a mind shift that has to happen. And more importantly, there's a leap of faith that needs to be executed, right? And
Yeah.
that's what it was for me along the way.
So, you're working half the year making some people's full-time salary times three, right? The average American, or times four. Why not work just the rest of the year also in sales, double the amount that you're making and ride it out, as opposed to choosing real estate as the better bet, learning all these new skills from scratch and giving up all that cash that you had access to and the skills
Yeah.
that obviously made you very
Yeah.
good at it.
Well, to your point, right? Door-to-door sales is the elite of sales. Like I'm so thankful because of the skill sets it teaches you, right? There's very few jobs where, and I'll give you this example. I would knock on a door, guy comes out irate, doesn't even know me, hates me already, wants to freaking kick me in the teeth. And then, 45 minutes later, I'm walking out his front door, cold Coke in hand. I have a signed PSA and he wants me to marry his daughter, right? Like what happens in those 45 minutes is very high level communication skills that are developed, right? De-escalation, communication, objections, right? Being able to empathize, EQ. There's all of these soft skills that are developed in it. With that being said, your day to day is often in that job very much you're getting 20 no's before you get a yes.
Yep.
And the mental side of that game teaches you a lot about mental fortitude. When I jumped into real estate, I remember a mentor of mine telling you got to be okay with taking 100 calls a day and getting told no.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I was like, that's it. Like 100 calls. Like I'm sitting in the AC and like got TV on in the background and I'm like, that's it. I did 100 doors a day. That's what I'm used to. Right. And so like, for me personally, like there was a lot of skills that developed from it, but what people don't realize is there's great money, but it's also, it takes a toll, right? Like, sure, I could have knocked, all 360 days of the year, but when you're in door-to-door sales, if you've ever done it, it's a very emotionally exhausting game. Like you have to be very disciplined, and I can do it at a high level for short periods of time, but at a certain point in time, it was unsustainable. I still believe that, right? I think there's crazies out there that can do it, but I also think there's easier ways to make money that I now do and I now understand, right? But at the time, that was what it was for me. Is like, this isn't sustainable. So the sustainability of it was doing it 4 months and then taking the rest of the 8 months off. That's literally what I would do. But like during those 4 months, your 60-hour weeks, you are grinding. And mind you, this is a grind where you're getting yelled at multiple times a day and you're having to overcome that. You're having to fight that. So the mental fortitude that it takes to knock doors is one thing that I'm thankful for, because you develop a lot of these like soft skills. And that honestly, that was like the breeding ground in my mind for for building my company. And you see it in a lot of billionaires, Mark Cuban, a lot of these guys that have written books. You actually ask them, what was their first job? Door-to-door sales, right? And there's a reason for that. So
Yeah, I remember when my first job was called cold calling for telemarketing, and I remember my manager was like, "I want you to go and get 300 no's," and I'm like, "Wait, no, I'm here to make money." And she's like, "Yeah, everyone's here to make money, but just go and get your 300 no's, right?" And then I would just call constantly. It got to the point where I was just completely like, someone would say no, it would just go over my head. I'd be like, "How do I just turn this into a yes?" You know exactly what
yeah,
you said. So I think it's a super valuable skill, and I'm sure that it equipped you with skills that made you as successful as you are today, and I'll touch upon those. But I want to ask you, so you were in the sales role, and then within the first 5 months of making the switch, you acquired 50 properties, if I'm not mistaken, right?
yep.
Which is not normal. So walk me through how you even knew the model existed, co-hosting arbitrage, creative structures. Like, who taught you that? How did you find out about it? How were you so comfortable going all in on something that you knew nothing about, and then being that successful? What did you see that others didn't?
So my progress came in the real estate game by way of problems that many in the real estate game told me were massive bottlenecks, right? That told me were unsolvable. And for me, like, I have in my home office, I have this picture of Michael Jordan, and he's in the air getting ready to do a signature dunk. And there's words in the frame right around him that says, "Tell me I can't." And like, that's how I operate, right? Like, if you want to get me to do something, tell me I can't do it. And I remember all these real estate gurus, right? Real estate agents, brokers, whatever, were telling me like, hey, if you want to scale, just know it's going to take you time, right? And in my head, I'm like, there's no way that, like, somebody has to have figured out a way to scale real estate quickly. And that was the problem that I attacked at the time. When I first got into real estate, it was in the management space. So I just created a management company that I was servicing people. There was zero equity involved, but I understood how to operate a short-term rental because I was managing people's short-term rentals. When I wanted to buy, I had 300 grand of my own money, and I started. I just took action. I bought the first two homes, and that took almost all of my money. That took the first 200 grand of that 300. And in my head, I was like, okay, two problems. One, I had to put a crap ton of money down to buy these two homes. I don't always have 100 grand to do that with. But then two, like, my money's going to only go so far, right? And so the solution came by way of me really just focusing on one problem of how do I buy more properties faster? And that was the birth of really me finding creative finance, right? And what's funny about it is, like, people listening to this may be familiar with Pace Morby. He's the one that's made it somewhat popular in really in the last 5 to 6 years because of his marketing skills. And he's a very good operator in the creative space. But this has been a method that's been around for decades, right? It's nothing new. But what's interesting is how often it gets swept under the rug when you talk about acquiring real estate. And all creative finance is just an umbrella term for being able to buy properties in an alternative fashion than just going and getting a loan from a bank, right? Because going and getting a loan from a bank, everybody knows you have to have credit, you have to have seasoned income, you have to have X, Y, and Z. It is a colonoscopy. And oftentimes it is a big pain in the butt and the barrier for people to scale and buy quickly. But creative finance oftentimes is just me and the seller, just me and a homeowner, and we're negotiating a contract. We put it on paper, the house is the leverage, and we transact a deal, right? And there's a lot more details to that, obviously, but what's important for people to know is that that exists. There is a whole world of being able to acquire properties and buy real estate where you don't have to go through the traditional hoops of traditional. And that is really where I found this start of, something really special, was being able to go and buy creative. And so I bought my first two properties, with the money I had. Then I bought my third creatively, having just known about it within like a month. And the only thing I really knew about it was what I had read on the internet and watched on YouTube. Like, I want to be very clear. I didn't know much about creative finance when I started. I just started. And I'm so thankful I did, because the best education I could have ever had was from that one deal. And granted, that deal is not profitable. In fact, I've lost more money from that one deal than any deal, and I still have it. I still have it. It's vacant, and the reason I don't let go of it is because of the sentimental part of me of that was tuition for me. That was the cost of tuition, and I would do it over again, 100 times over, because being able to execute on that first deal, regardless of how crappy it was, gave me the education and the confidence, frankly, to do it again and again and again and again. And that's how it started. And it really was a hockey stick because once I bought it, I was like, this is it. Oh, I'm gonna go out and then we just went and I just went. And mind you, the first few parts of my portfolio are not sexy at all. But again, I look at the bulk of that as tuition because you look at the last 10 properties that I bought, any investor, any seasoned investor would look at that and they buy it in a heartbeat because now we've gotten really dangerous. But the best teacher in anything is experience. And I'm just glad I was willing to take a bet on that.
Yeah, and I love that because I think whenever you look at any kind of successful entrepreneur, they always never start with the perfect system, just like you did. You built the system from whatever knowledge you were able to get. And most people wait to understand everything before they start. And that's why they never start. And that's why they never become successful, just because they waiting for perfect action. But imperfect action is always the common thread and the pattern between successful people. So it sounds like you definitely knew that you were in over your head, I guess, in the sense that, like, I don't really have any experience. I'm not 100% sure what I'm doing. I just need to go and make sure that this is possible. How did you navigate that part? Like, not really knowing what you were doing, only having the information that you learned, no real experience. How were you able to be so confident about moving ahead with it? And what would you say to people that are in the position where they're like, I don't know enough about everything, and so I should know more before I start?
One thing that, interestingly enough, and this may be different for others, but for me, one thing that gave me a lot of confidence was executing on things that others told me were not possible. That, by the way, those people that were telling me were in the space. And like what that gave me a lot of confidence and the realization I continued. Because I remember when I closed my first creative, I went back and told one of my close friends who's a realtor. And he was like dumbfounded. He was like, what? And like, he's been in it for like a decade. And I was like, yeah, I just bought it. And he's like, no, there's no way. And I showed it to him. And like, that to me taught me a lot about, like, it displayed for me clear as day the mental limitations that really the world puts on us. Like, it really puts us in a box to make us think that you can only do things this way. Right. And so for me, I found a ton of confidence to continue on this path as I started to really not only break my own barriers, but for me, I was betting on myself in anyways, right? I was like, I'm doing something, all of real estate's new to me. But to be able to then break mental barriers of people that were in space, that was like a big confidence booster for me to keep going. And honestly, like, that's, I think, what it often takes. Like, if you're not being called crazy, stupid, or like dumb, like, you're honestly not doing much. Like for me personally, I just think it takes what it takes to build something special. And oftentimes people around you aren't going to understand you or support you. But I think what it really comes down to is having that quiet confidence and having a good support system at home to be able to know, like, look, whatever happens, I'm going to learn from it and I'm going to keep going. And I like what Alex Ramosi says. He says, in business, you never win. There's never a point in time where you win at business. You make X amount of money or have X amount of doors. Like, there's no moment that you actually say you win. Winning in business is you keep playing the game. And the way that you lose is you stop, you quit. And from that framework, that's how I think people need to position themselves to, like, the game of business is won by really the last man standing, right? Like, that's really what it is. And for me, that's proven to be true over and over and over again.
I love that. You don't get to $75 million in alternative assets without taking some punches. For you, what was the hardest season in building Elk Ridge? And what was the moment or was there a moment that you genuinely weren't sure if it would work?
Yeah. I think for me, the hardest moment probably came around 2023. And this is around the time that everybody's feeling it, right? And that's because the short-term rental market, really the real estate market, started to it started to plateau, right? The bubble popped. Interest rates started going up. Fear started to enter the market. Rates weren't as good as they were because COVID money wasn't being stimulated in the economy. There was a lot of things happening for a lot of people in real estate. And honestly, like that was when I had to make a hard shift because we weren't making money. We were in the hole month to month. We were taking out debt to be able to sustain operations, and that's never a good place, right? And I'm so thankful because that was for me one of the key experiences in my career that really helped me like gain this optimism and this truth about real estate, and not just real estate but entrepreneurship, that there are an infinite amount of solutions out there to any given problem. You just have to ask yourself, are you willing to do what it takes to find it, right? To stick it through, to see it to the end. Because to your point, you don't ever get to $75 million in assets without seeing punches, without seeing failure. And honestly, like multiple times and the brink of failure. I mean, I've pushed my business to the brink of bankruptcy multiple times, right? But for us, it's all about, again, understanding, hey, there has to be a way out. There has to be a way out. Everybody's telling me file bankruptcy, like roll shop up. Like I've been told that multiple times, right? But for me, I'm like, I just remember when people told me the way I was buying real estate didn't exist. I just remember all these experiences where people told me this wasn't real. And like, that's where you really learn to find and dig to be able to see and create solutions, right? And I know I'm talking high level, but this whole game is high level. Money's a mindset game, right? Like if you're not right here and you're not telling you these things here, the solution will never provide itself. But that for me is what it was, is just continuing to fight and understanding, look, there's a way out of this. We got to find it.
So you're in that situation, you're burning cash, essentially, you're burning into your pocket. How do you navigate that? I want to go a little bit more tactical here, right? What were the moves that you made? What were the pivots that you did? What was a fundamental change that now looking back at it, you see this is what allowed us to get out of that situation?
So I'll talk tactical based on the market. So a lot of people don't know that there was an influx of supply between 2019 and 2021 of 48% of supply in the Airbnb market between those 2 years, meaning there was an increase of people jumping into Airbnb. There was a ton, right? That came crashing hard in 2023. Rates started dropping, right? There was a lot less people traveling. And that's really where not just me, but we saw there was a huge exodus and a huge like rate of failure in the short-term rental business. That was due to two things: demand going down in terms of people traveling and Airbnbs, supply being oversaturated, frankly, but then also on top of that, affordability being at an all-time low. Really, like you couldn't afford anything because of rates. Interest rates now skyrocketed, right? There's very few things you can control when rates are through the roof and when occupancy is down. And when you're looking at it from a framework of like those two things dominating everything, it's hard to see opportunity and realization. But this is really where creative became a very unique solution to that problem, right? Because now that rates are lower and debt is higher because of interest rates, I had to be able to redraw the box to be able to play on rules that made sense, right? And for me, that was finding and structuring creative deals, right? If I couldn't go out and buy a DSCR note at 7% because it's no longer profitable because of the mortgage that is really the product of a 7% rate with 20% down, like, and rates on occupancy being down, like like you have to really, those are needles in a haystack. You have to operate at a top 1% percentile in any specific market. So to be able to really counteract all of those uncontrollables, we had to control the controllable, which was the deal. And it's like, okay, if I know that this property is going to gross at most 80 grand a year, I have to go buy a property that has a debt service that's at least 10 to 15% of my OPEX month to month, knowing that it's 80K. And therein is where the solution is provided, right? Because I can't change occupancy. I can only do so much to operate, right? Market is significantly slower. So there's some controllables in the sense that we can be better operators, amenities, SEO, etc. But even then, the market is slower. That's the truth for everybody, right? But then debt, I couldn't control the interest rates as it pertained to traditional financing. So then I have to be able to take those two things and put it in a sandbox of which I can control, which is the creative side of buying. And that's what it came down to. So now we just got really, really dangerous at finding seller finance and sub two deals, this umbrella of creative finance. And that was the unlocks tactically of being able to play on our own rules. Because now when you look at our portfolio hedged up against some of these other STR portfolios, a lot of people are looking at our gross numbers and they're like, there's no way you're profitable. And the reason they think that is because they don't see our debt service. It's like, well, our blended rate across our portfolio is 4%, right? And we've purchased in the last 3 years. That changes the game and the numbers for everything, right? And that was the unlock for us. That's what kept us in the game.
Yeah, I think that's super valuable. There's always opportunity in crisis. And so as things get harder, the smartest people have to sharpen their skills. And so
Yeah.
I have a strong feeling that the moment that the way that you shape, the way that you underwrite and your risk tolerance and the kind of deals that you go for today has a large part to play as you having gone through that moment where it's like, this is the toughest it's ever going to get. Now we need to become laser focused and become super sharp. So how has that moment shaped your underwriting and risk tolerance today?
So I think the biggest thing is learning from your mistakes. And it sounds so simple and cliche, but if your underwrite model in any market, really in any industry, if that's not a living and breathing document, meaning that it's an organism in your organization that is constantly evolving, you've already lost, right? You're not playing for the long term. And I wish I could show you like my underwrite model, like now versus even 18 months ago, let alone 4 years ago, 5 years ago. You know what I mean? It's drastically different. And so understanding like, and again, I just love the idea that like any loss isn't a loss, it's tuition, right? It's the cost of tuition. And that's really what it's been for us to where we have now arrived at an underwrite model of how we look at deals, how we underwrite them, like what do we actually propose their value, like what the SEO is, what the potential is based on amenities. Like there's so much data there that we've over the years collected to be able to be very dangerous today. And that doesn't come without honestly failures, but then just improving 1% a day, 1% a day in our underwriting. And that's how we treat our underwriting is it's legitimately a living and breathing document that we continually reference with every new deal and data point that we get from the past.
What did that season cost you personally?
Oh, it's honestly, I mean, just off the top of my head, the quantifiable number is like 1.4. But like, honestly, you and I both know there's opportunity cost and unquantifiable amounts of stress, heartache, sleepless nights, financial stress that like is the number that trickles down to everything. I mean, we had to fire people. We had, you know what I mean? Like there's so much there that it was, I mean, multiple seven figures, easy.
That's on the number side. What about just the personal side, the family side? What I really want to showcase and highlight is when you go through an experience like this and everything's tough and you're firing people and you're losing money, it's very difficult to separate the business and the family side. It's very difficult to not bring that into your house and give off that energy and still have a massive smile on your face when you walk through the door.
Yeah.
What did you do during that time to that? And I don't know if you did it successfully. If you did it successfully, then tell us. And if you didn't, then tell us what you did. But
Yeah.
how did you manage the family side, the wife, the children, the other things in your life outside of just business?
Yeah. Someone once told me that this is early on in my career that the greatest business decision you could ever make is who you choose to marry. And I've always remembered that from even before I got married. And me and my wife now have been married for 10 years. And that that has continued to ring true the more and more I do in especially the game of entrepreneurship. And the reason being is because, at the end of the day, like if you can't go home to a support system that no matter how much money you made or how much money you lost, if you can't go home to a support system that's excited to see you and that is a safe and peaceful place, it's very hard to play this game, right? Like for me personally, my wife, my kids have been the absolute rock and foundation, not only of why I do it, but also of the source and power in which I draw from to do it, right? And we often don't think about that. We often think about the why, right? I want to take care of them, I want to do this, but like I also couldn't do it without them. Like I couldn't. Like they are everything to me. And to your point, and I'll share this with you. And I actually don't even think I've ever shared this on a podcast before, but I have never been I've never been like a depressed person. Like in fact, I think there was a point in time in my life where I attributed it to mental weakness, right? And to being a weak thing of people being, depressed, anxiety, and suicidal. And Thanksgiving of, this was 2022, 2023, like things got very real for me. And it was the very first time that I could actually articulate where I was depressed. Like I was depressed. I would wake up and I think a lot of entrepreneurs talk about it, but when you actually go through it and then you hear people talk about it, then it resonates different. It's different, right? But this idea of waking up and you regret that you did, right? My escape was sleepy. Like I'd wake up and I'd be like, damn, like I had to go hustle, I had to figure out. And you wake up with this very real physical like anxiety and pain. And it brought a lot of empathy to me of like what people were going through. And it really did push me to mental limits that I've never been to before. And that was scary. But I'm thankful because in that, like, I've always been thankful to have a wife and have a home front that have helped me through it, right? That have kept me grounded, right? And have given me confidence when nobody would. And that's what business does to you. That is why your spouse is your greatest asset when it comes to building, right? And for me, that couldn't have been more real and more true in those experiences.
It's amazing to hear that you have the family that you have, and also I appreciate you sharing that. And I know that you record a lot of podcasts too, but I don't think I've spoken to any 8 to 10 figure entrepreneurs, founders that haven't experienced some sort of burnout at some stage, even if it was in a previous business or feeling really low and feeling really depressed. And I think that part of the journey isn't highlighted as much. And I think more people need to know that you're not going to win every single time, and there are going to be really difficult days, and you are going to experience lower lows and higher highs, and that's just part of the game,
Yeah.
And having that support system around you is so critical. Whether that be faith, whether that be family, hopefully it's all of the above.
Yeah.
So, in every career, there's a hinge moment that changes the trajectory for you. Okay. So already I know you just giving up, not easy money, because I know you're working very hard for it, but money that you knew was, going to be consistent and you were very good at what you did. And coming on this journey, I know is one, right? And so that's kind of the pre-0 to 1 moment. But when you look back at like, when did things really change for us? Like, what was that like? As I say that to you, what's the first place that your brain goes to, and what was that decision in the Elk Ridge story behind it?
Yeah. So honestly, it was last year. It was last year leading up to this year. Um, I can say we were just over the hump of a financial like crisis. Honestly, like we figured sales out. We started to streamline some things. Around this time last year, I was introduced to a friend that I thought would be a great asset to the company, would be a partner, right? And I don't want to go too much into detail of that because I think to answer your question, that the hinge point came shortly after that. But like it, long story short, like it didn't end well. Like this, I didn't realize the intent of this individual. I think I think they had misaligned morals in certain ways, and that's what affected the relationship in the end, right? And it really hurt me because I'm a very personal person. Like for me, I value relationships over money. And that's what really got me. It really hurt me and struck me. And, it's funny when one door closes, oftentimes the other opens. And I am thankful with the timeline of how it happened because legitimately, not even 60 days after, I met another gentleman who I had known for years, but we had been reintroduced from another friend, a mutual friend. And he came at the time where I kind of had my walls up because of this prior experience with this other partner. And long story short, like I finally was like, I need to get out of my head. Let's get back to the abundance game and give it a shot. And long story short, since our engagement from the beginning of this year all the way to this year, we passed last year's numbers like in the middle of the summer, right? And that taught me a lot about really people. Your greatest asset in any business is people. And I think in every entrepreneur's journey, there's a tipping point of knowing when to pull the trigger on people that you think you can't afford. And I'll tell you this much, the cheapest you will ever get great talent is today. It's the cheapest you'll ever get them, right? And that's been a lesson that I've had to learn over and over, but that this taught me and was a hinging point was really being able to just buy in to the right people with the right skill sets and allow them to operate within your ecosystem. And since then, I can tell you like the reason it's been a hinging point, because since then our payroll has almost tripled, but it's no coincidence that our revenue is almost doubled. And so there's a correlation there, right? And so for me, it's that's been the hinge point for me. And that was really the learning lesson that I learned really fairly recently to where now, I'm living and operating in a very different space of abundance when it comes to people. Steve Jobs owns, I think, 8% of Apple, Elon Musk, 11% of Tesla. Point being, these billionaires, the guys that are the richest men in the world, own fractions of these empires they built. And so for me, I bring that up because I really think to get to the next level, at a certain point in time, you have to give pieces of the empire away to have to allow people to help you build. And that was the hinge point for me.
How did you become comfortable in doing that? When you're in the position where it's like, whoa, this is the most expensive hire I'm ever going to do. How did you know, one, that it was the right time, and two, how were you confident that it was the right decision on the person itself?
I think anybody that tells you it felt like the right time or it was this, I think they're bullshitting. Like, I don't think you know. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's the whole point is like, I didn't know, honestly. And like, for me, it was a bet and a leap of faith to do that. And there's something to be said about, a good deal, a good deal when both parties walk away feeling like they both like sacrifice something, right?
Yeah.
And that speaks to the principle of like, really, like you have to be bought in more ways than just the paycheck. And that's how I look at like hires now, right? Like if I feel it a little bit and I don't feel like they're worth it, this, that, the other, like that is me putting my faith in an individual to come in and to create the value that is absent. Hence why it doesn't feel good. But guess what? To get to any next level, you have to take risks. You have to buy into people. And that just naturally, for me, I've learned is the name of the game. Now, granted, you have to hire fast and fire fast. That's my motto, right? Some people like to, hire fast, or hire slow, fire. Like, I think it's hire and fire fast. And that's because you give yourself a runway that you can control. But at the end of the day, like, you won't find those people without taking bets, right? And you may lose on some, but the ones that you win, they make up themselves in more tenfold, right? And that's the game you're after.
Like when you look back at it now, you said, look, you tripled your payroll, you doubled your revenue as a result of this hire. What did the hire come in and do that helped double the revenue that you weren't previously doing?
Operations.
Yeah.
Operations. And for me, it was like, that was my baby, right? That was like, I told everybody, like, I am the operations king at short-term rentals. And part of, especially as the entrepreneur, as the CEO, like part of the biggest and hardest lesson that I had to learn is realizing that you have to bring in the people that are better subject matter experts than you in specific pieces of the business. And you have to be okay with that. Right. And, for me, I think I felt like there was a lack of authenticity if I felt like I wasn't the subject matter expert. Because I was like, hey, I'm the guy that knows everything about STRs, this, that, the other. And little did I know that that actually was a limitation, not only to me, but everybody that decided to work with me, right? Because at the end of the day, as a visionary, as a CEO, as the head of the company, like you are not an operator. And that's not the highest value that you can bring to your company, even though it was early on. Early on, you're wearing all the hats, right? And that's why it's very easy for you to feel like you know more than most, right? But like it really taught me a lot about my own weaknesses when I brought in really a subject matter expert specifically on operations. That, and this was that individual, right? This was that individual I was talking about you in January, where like, and frankly, it was expensive, like hell expensive, right? And it's funny because you fast forward like 8 months later, and I feel like he's being underpaid.
Yeah, yeah.
you know? And I my only regret is I didn't do it sooner, right? And so, but I think that's every entrepreneur's crux at that point of flipping the switch to get to the next level is they have to realize like you got to bring people that are better than you, right? And that's what I did.
And I don't know if you remember our conversation in Tampa, but I've just gone and done the exact same thing. So that smile that you have on your face is the same one that I have now, knowing that we finally pulled the trigger and it changes everything.
Yeah.
You wear multiple hats, like you said. You're a CEO, you're an investor, you're a father, you're a husband, you're a podcaster, you're a mentor, right? You got a lot going on in your life. What are the core principles or routines that have stayed consistent for you, no matter how big your family's got, your portfolio's got, your company's got?
For me, there's a few things that I like to like keep close to me that have been like very sacred lessons and principles that I like to live by. One of them early on was one that my dad instilled in me. And it's kind of twofold. And he'd always tell me this line. He'd always say, "Son, when you don't give when you have nothing, you'll never give when you have everything." And that to me was something early on that always has been instilled in me in the sense of like, you know, I am just here to take care of people, right? And in that same breath, he'd always follow it up with, you know, money, like the idea of money, right? And he would always tell me, son, like he always asked me these questions when I was a kid, like, why do we even make money? Like, what do we give? What like what's the reason that we care about a career? And I'd always give him the answers that we all think, well, to take care of our family, to buy a house, to buy a car, to have the things that we want and need, right? But my dad always brought this around to the spiritual aspect of life. And he was saying, son, the only reason and the only purpose that we make money and that we drive revenue and that we care about our careers is because when we can do that, it increases our capacity to serve more people, right? And I think there is a powerful stewardship that comes to those that are blessed with skill sets and opportunities that allow them to make a lot of money and allow them to be put in positions that are very financially lucrative, right? And there's an obligation and a sense of obligation that comes with it. At least this is my personal belief. So coming back to this core belief of what you asked me of what I live by, I am genuinely operating from this place where I believe that the only reason I've been blessed with these opportunities is because it's a calling of mine to serve more people, right? In different ways, in opportunities, in transactions, in charity, in whatever it is. And there's been too many times in this business where I get really lucky, like really, really lucky. Like something just comes the nick of time. And it's the solution, it's the deal, it's whatever that's the saving grace. And I depend. We had this conversation about religion. I'm a very God fearing person. Like for me, I'm Christian. I'm Mormon. For me, like I really believe that that is a sense of stewardship. Like I really believe that this isn't my own because of all that I've been blessed with, and I hold a sacred responsibility to take care of people and to serve my fellow man, and that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, man. No, I love that. And I think when people spend time with you, it's you can see that you actually do live by those principles as well, you know? I think a lot of people talk about wanting to be that way and very few live it. And I think that's one of the main reasons why you and I connected, because it was just so obvious to see the kindness and the generosity that you had and your wanting and willingness to help other people, regardless of how it impacted you. How do you protect your decision making? You know, like you have to make a lot of decisions every single day, at least high level ones, if not in the weeds sometimes, I'm sure. But your sleep, your health, your information, like who do you talk to? Do you have personal trainers? Do you have therapists? Or like what do you
Yeah.
do with?
That's that's a thoughtful question, in the sense that, like, that's a great inspired question to ask, like, the CEO, right? Because I think you understand the context of where that comes from, because there is a very real thing of decision fatigue, right? We get home and it's like, I tell my wife the perfect vacation is the one that I don't have anything to do with. Like I'm just there for the ride. That's my perfect vacation. Like, but one thing that I've done that has been extremely, I think is often underutilized across all executives, because I work with a lot now, is personal assistance, right? Like finding glue and connectors within your organization to segment out your own personal life, right? And for me, I have my right hand who's my chief of staff. Her name is Josie. She has a team underneath her of VAs. I have a personal assistant. Her name's Maddie. And then I have an office assistant, Mia. And between the three of those, it's really more, because Josie has a whole team of VAs under her. Their whole sole purpose is essentially to take care of me, right? And to navigate and manage my life and what I do. And what in turn, it allows me to be very, very effective in the decisions and in the time that I need to be very present for. And oftentimes, like, I think the greatest asset that any visionary and CEO can give to their company is A, their availability when they're needed, and B, their disposition, their vision, their countenance in a place where they can actually see and make very well timed and very articulate decisions. And you have to be at a place of calm, cool, collected to be able to make the most effective decisions in a world of constant chaos. And early on, you don't have the convenience or the paycheck to be able to create that environment, but we have now, right? And that's what I've done. And now it's priceless. Now for me, it's everything, right? And because I think if people were to like see my day to day, like they they'd be I golf a lot. Like I go to every single one of my kids. Like I go on multiple dates with my wife a week, right? Like there's a lot of things that I do that I think if people were to see, they'd be like, what the hell is he doing? But like you and I both know that we don't time in or time out. We're measured by impact, right? And I have to be able to create an environment where I can have an incredible impact. And oftentimes the environment that needs to be created to do that is really delegating your life and being available for the right things. And that's how I've been able to protect my time. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's
No, no, it does. One of the questions I always ask on the podcast is what would surprise somebody like a new entrepreneur or an experienced entrepreneur when they look at your calendar? And you answered that, already just now with the amount of
yeah,
time that you spend doing the you stuff or the
yeah.
family, the wife, the sports. Let me ask you one final question on your own mental operating process, right? What would you say is a habit that gives you an unfair advantage over other investors doing the same thing as you?
Hands down. I have a non-negotiable every Tuesday and Thursday night. Sometimes it's one night, not always twice a week. I go on a date with my wife. And that hands down is the greatest advantage that I have above and beyond anybody else. And I really believe that. I really believe that because of the time it allows me to connect with my most important business partner, but it also allows me to continue to like receive feedback from my soulmate, the one that knows me the most, right? To keep me in line and to continue to make sure that we're in constant alignment so that where I'm going is in full alignment. And, I feel like the higher you get in any organization, the more ideological the conversations become. And sometimes I recognize that sometimes the stuff I say sounds like fluff, but it's the truth. It really is truth. Like I think any competitive advantage, like the most dangerous competitive advantages, aren't tangible advantages. They're actually spiritual. They're mental, right? And that to me is like everything. And so for me, being able to take time away specifically for my number one and then to be able to digest with her like our progress, what I'm doing, what she's doing. And honestly, a lot of times it's not even about work. That ultimately puts me in a place to be able to deliver day in and day out incredible impact across my organizations. And that's my competitive edge.
That's amazing, man, and not something I was expecting you to say, or I think people would link with the success of the business side of it. Um, I just want to finish off on what you believe now, um, as opposed to before when you first started your entrepreneurial journey. You talk about generational wealth a lot, and I've heard you speak about being the person on the family tree who changed it all. After building an 8-figure firm, a $75 million portfolio, what do you believe about wealth now that you didn't believe at the start?
There's this oftentimes image that is portrayed of the wealthy, and oftentimes it's cutthroat, it's nasty, it's grimy, it's gritty, and there's elements to that, right? But one thing that I have learned is that honestly, the guys that are at the top, and more often than not, the guys that are at the top, the guys and girls that are at the top, they're operating from this incredibly insane place of abundance. It's actually the opposite. Like what the world would tell you these rich people do and are is quite contrary to the reality of it. And that's one thing that has continually like warmed my heart of like when I go out and continue to operate in business with abundance of like just trusting that mode and knowing that that happens. I can tell you that, I have done more handshake deals with larger sums of money that have gone well and continue to go well than I did with lower amounts of money. And it's because you're operating from two different people, two different mindsets, two different groups, right? And that's been honestly one thing that I've loved about it is like the more money I make, the more abundance I see, the more abundant people I meet, and the more abundant I become. And it's not because you just have this money that you can just frivolously like give away and you not feel it. It's because you're literally operating with people that are abundant because it's an eternal principle. You reap what you sow. You give to the universe, it will give tenfold back. That is a universal principle. You read any self-help book of like a billionaire or millionaire, one of the constant pillars of each of theirs that they talk about, that's an eternal principle, is service, charity, giving back. Like always, like they will always tell you, you give your money away, I'm telling you it's going to make you more money in your business. And that's been honestly the thing that has been really surprising to me and super thankful because I found a lot more alignment as I've made more money with that abundance mentality as I've seen it around at those people at the top. Right. Oh,
What do you want the families you work with to say about you in 20 years' time?
I there's this word that I use and I've used it on this podcast, impact, right? I think in other words, it could be legacy. Nobody cares what you've done or accomplished. They only care about how you made them feel. And frankly, they'll only remember how you made them feel. Right. And, I take some pride in like trying to genuinely leave anybody I come in personal contact with a positive interaction. And I think there's so much legacy and impact that can go from that to where now it's actually served me really well, right? My reputation's everything. For the most part, I like to think that people, when they think about Lawman, they feel cared, they feel trust, they feel loyalty. And like for me, when I die, I think that is going to be the greatest impact and legacy that I can create is just people remembering how I made them feel, right? And that's the legacy that I hope not only leave but to instill in my posterity, into those around me, right? Because that's a legacy that will continue to live on forever and can continue to be, in perpetuity, perpetuated amongst other people when you can give it to them. And that's what I want to leave behind when I go.
How has your definition of enough changed?
I got to enough of what I thought was enough really quickly. Like in things and in like, I think if you looked at my house, it's pretty modest. Like, granted, I drive a Cybertruck. It's about the flashiest thing I do, and that was a tax play. But like I actually got to the height of like what I thought was enough very quickly in terms of like physical. Because I have no desire to own a big house, especially being in real estate. I have zero desire. Like I care more about the neighborhood and my neighbors and my kids' friends than I do about like inviting people over to a big mansion, right? And in that, you have the game of enough has changed, right? It's no longer enough when I get to this certain point in time of like things and material things and financial status. It's now this game of really impact, legacy, but more importantly, fulfillment. Because when you can kind of shift into fulfillment, then enough, you can never have enough. That's what enough becomes, right? Like I can never serve enough people. I can never help enough people. And that's where enough has drastically changed for me. It's gone from material to legacy. And when you make that change, you realize there's never enough.
It's amazing. How can people find out more about you? I know you have your own podcast. You also have your own community of people that are looking to, replicate something, something that you've built and have generational wealth for their own families. What are the best places for them to learn more, hear more about what you're doing?
Easiest way to get a hold of me is Instagram. So Lame, Lame.Kinikini, Kinikini. Those are the two best places to get a hold, or that's the single best place to get a hold of me. I'm in my own DMs, so people think that it's somebody else. It's actually me, but that's usually the best place to get a hold of me. So
amazing. Lame, thank you so much for being on the fifth quarter. Your journey shows that wealth isn't just about how many doors you own or how big your portfolio is. It's about how creatively and responsibly and intentionally you build it. You've taken tools like creative financing, alternative assets that most people find intimidating, including myself. Like I have a resource like you, and I'm still scared to be like, how do I do this thing? And you've turned it into a pathway for not only your own family to have generational wealth, but other families too. I appreciate you for coming on the show. I also appreciate you for not what you've just built with Elk Ridge, but for who you are as a person and the values and the principles that you stand by. And most of all, for proving, I think, to a lot of entrepreneurs that you don't need to sacrifice your family to build wealth. And I think out of even all the numbers and everything that you've achieved, for me, who you are, your principles, and not sacrificing the time with your family is the real win. So thank you so much for being on the show. This has been the fifth quarter. Until next week. Thank you so much, Lame.
appreciate you.